Merl here again. Welcome back to Prairie Wings Performance. In this video, we are going to be going over the engine sensors in the little Corvair. We're going to be taking this ECU and we're going to tell this ECU how to deal with the information from the sensors through this laptop. But as well, we're going to set up this laptop to know what engine and everything we're working on. This will apply to different ECUs, a bunch of the information. But what we have in here is we have the cam and crank sensors, which we have other videos on. We have the intake air temperature sensor. We have oil pressure sensor. We have a secondary backup temperature sensor. We have fuel pressure. We have a wideband. We're going to get all that information entered into the laptop, which we're going to send that message to the ECU so it knows how to deal with all of this stuff. So let's get at it. All right, in the manual, I just have drawn up what I kind of have done. So this is the white connector. Pin 10 is an orange going out to the manifold air temperature sensor. We have pin 11, the coolant temperature sensor. We have pin 21 going to the oil temperature sensor. And then our sensor return all goes into that pin 18 of the wire connector. And let's go in and get these ones calibrated in the ECU. This is the intake air temperature sensor or manifold air temperature sensor. And this one I used an AMPFI sensor, and it is just this sensor here. And if you go onto their page for specifications, it gives you the calibration. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I am going to enter it into the ECU. Now that we've checked the data online, we go into our familiar tools settings. We want to calibrate the thermistor tables. Now if you take a look at this, we have a drop down menu here. We're going to want to do the air temperature sensor. Now there are some values that are in MegaSquirt that are available to us. And so what we're going to do is, this is a GM. We're just going to put the GM value in. And if we take a look, these settings here are not exactly what they have online. So what I am going to do, oh, this is on Celsius. Haha, if I change it to Fahrenheit, still not. So what I'm going to do is I am going to actually take and change these values. So this one says it is 87. So we're going to change that to 87. And this one here, it says that we are online, that we are at 146. And, ooh, that says 246. That doesn't work. 146. Yeah, make sure you don't mess up in this because this could really be bad. So we are going to write this to the controller now. So a bit of a challenge with the air-cooled stuff. So this is the Dub Shop sensor that they make. This is the only place you can get this sensor from what I understand. And the quality of this thing is ridiculous. I have a picture I'll throw in there that I took when it was in the vehicle. Anyways, this is a sensor that I chose to use. And if you look in here, well, we end up with these specs. So we'll take a picture of that and we will put that into the ECU. Okay, this coolant temperature sensor. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to hit the drop down, go to coolant temperature sensor. And we are going to pick the GM one. And on this one here, it's in Fahrenheit. If we would have left it the way it was originally, it would be correct for this sensor. And so we just got to change that back. And again, quit messing up. Make sure you're good and write that to the controller. So those two sensors are written in. Okay, I have added other sensors like fuel pressure and so on, and we can access these in different parts of the tables. What I want to do is I want to go into advanced engine, and I'm going to go to the generic sensor inputs. Now in here, I have my list in my book of the sensors that I've used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this list that I have, and I am going to change these sensors into the correct naming, and I'm going to transform, or I guess I'm going to take and put the values in to calibrate them. So I'll get that done and I'll bring you back. Okay, I want to back this up a sec. I guess before we go to the required fuel, we want to make sure that we have our firing order all put in here. And so if you notice, because I've seen this a few times where firing order, when people wire this in, they aren't correct, they can't get it started. And what the deal is injector A or injector A or coil A are both wired in the sequence. So A is 1, B is not 2, B is the firing order 4. So what I'm talking about here is, if you take a look in the book here, the injectors and the coils, you want to have in the firing order correct wired. So anyway, our output for injector and spark A is cylinder number 1. B, well, the injector and spark output of B is going to be wired directly to cylinder number 4, not cylinder number 2. Okay, going back to this here, the ECU, we go into the required fuel, and you're going to see we have a 2.7 liter. It's a 6-cylinder, and in here, I guess I said before that it was 14-pound injectors, but it's actually 14.4. And our air-fuel ratio, we don't have, and we're not going to use an ethanol sensor. If we had ethanol in here, this number would be going down 14.6, 5, whatever, depending on the composition or the amount of ethanol in there, but we are sticking with good old 14.7 for this case. And so that is one thing you want to do. So we are calculating that, and that is all good. That will fill all of this, these out once you have that all filled in. So our spare temp sensor, this is the sensor, and this is the oil pressure sensor. Now, here is where I get the specs for this. And you can see that this has volts with a pull-up and the resistance and everything. And I'll get to that more in the thermistor in the MS3 Pro software. This ECU about quite a while ago, so it is quite old. And in the software here, I went into tools and I was trying to add that third oil pressure thermistor. And when I went into the calibrate thermistor tables, you're going to see, if you look back in the video, you'll see that this was a different release, as well as things in here changed quite a bit, because I had to go in and actually do a firmware update. So I downloaded the new firmware from the site, followed all this, and voila, a whole bunch of things got easier for me. And in here, before there was 2, now I have a third temperature sensor that I can calibrate. So that AEM sensor, what I did is I took that information and I went to the coalesced on it, because this is not a linear file. I mean, you could make an ink file to get this accurate. This is going to be a backup sensor. If something happens down the road, we can switch this to run the vehicle if we needed. But anyways, so what I did is I took a temperature range of just colder than we would be normally driving, and used the resistance for that, as well as the coldest resistance. And then I used the highest temperature that this is supposed to read, and entered those. And then, just for information, the biased resistor value, this right here, is the internal resistor in the ECU that can take this information and make it usable for the ECU. So anyway, we want to take and write that all to the controller. Now, I had talked about the generic sensor inputs, and I was entering that information. So I want to get back to that. Now, if we take a look in here, in the old days, if you look back, this said minimum value was actually 0 volts and max was 5 volts. Well, after the firmware update, these values have changed. And how we deal with that is, well, if we look, my pressure transducers that I was using, well, I ordered AEM ones, but of course they come Holley now because that's Holley owns everything, I guess. Anyways, so I'm using the top sensor there, but if you look, it says after the part number listed, it says each sensor has a linear voltage of output range of 0.5 to 4.5 volts. Well, that used to be an issue, so I had to draw a linear scale to get these values. Well, interesting enough, in their firmware, they really fixed some things, because if I go into this drop-down menu, I can actually pick my linear 0.5 to 4.5, make this more accurate, because normally that, if you looked at that scale, it is 0 to 100 psi. So I can now enter 0 and I can enter the 100 psi. So I can easily take these and use that linear scale properly, I guess we'll call it. And that is now way easier for me. And then I labeled this one here, this oil temperature sensor custom one. And anyway, I have everything showing up and working properly for all of that. The one thing that I really like to do before I get this going running wise and so on is I like to take and get my initial things in here that I want for getting started on tuning. So first of all, we can go and right click on here and go down to the designer mode. Now, when we do that, I can change whatever we need to change in here. So if I want to change any gauge parameters, I go into the designer and I would do into properties, and then I can change what this gauge is going to read, the size of it, my higher RPM, low RPM. So these basically, we're changing where this all reads, red wise and so on. Yeah, it's pretty simple to set up. You'd have to play in there a little bit to do what you want. But I guess the thing is that I really want to get across with this is I would take, I like a few extra gauges in here for tuning, for figuring out the tune. So I'll move this one over and I'm going to take this one over here. I want to know what my timing is going. And then throttle position, of course, is very important. Fuel load, well, yeah, we'll leave that on there. It's not a huge deal with where we are right now. The one thing that I want to do is I'm going to add a gauge. So if I go into here and I add a new gauge, okay, I'm just going to grab this normal one here and add a gauge. I can pick any of the gauges that I want, but what I'll do is I'll just grab this gauge, throw it in here. And again, this is just for me for tuning. So I'm going to pull it up to be, I don't care, roughly the same size as the other ones. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a definition to this. So gauge designer, I want to go to the properties, and then I am going to go to, I want to see the IAC position. Okay, and this is not a stepper motor. Okay, I'm going to add a definition to this. Now, what I want to do is I am going to be, I can make this gauge whatever we need on there. So outputs, I'm going to go in here and I am going to just look for the idle pulse width, because then I can see what's going on with that gauge. So this tells me what pulse width my idle valve is. That's going to help me set up my idle valve, so when I am opening and closing the throttle plate with the screw, I can get it dialed in where I have a lot of range for high idle, and my low idle, I want with the screw set, I want that to be at a fairly low percentage. You know, probably under 10 when I'm sitting there running warm at my preferred idle, so that when I go for a drive and I'm coming back down to idle, the IAC can hold it open and tail me down. So if I do a burnout, I can actually have this come slow instead of stalling when you get out of doing a burnout. In this car, I'm not doing a burnout, but in race cars and stuff like that, that's one of the things. So basically, when you're setting up your vehicle, you want to have, you know, your main gauges. This is one of them. I definitely want my air fuel ratio. I want my coolant temperature. This is pulse width. This is probably going to be set up. We define it for our injectors, and that it'd be if we're doing full throttle pulls, to make sure that we are not too much opening the injectors too wide. And I would probably, you know, go with a percentage on that, not milliseconds. But anyways, that is how we are going to start getting this thing running. Is and you can add gauges as you require. So I want to basically, I want to take this out of designer mode. So now this is fixed, and when I save this, when I go to shut it down, it's going to ask if I want to save it, and yeah, I'm going to save this for tuning. Our main dashboard again looks like this. Nobody's really going to see this unless you have a dash that you're using. This would be on your dash. You can customize this the same way you would customize anything else. I can move this around, do whatever I want with all of this. I can add you know, indicator lights when water meth is on, how much is going, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, very, very easy to use this stuff in here. It's very cool to be able to make a dash for yourself. And there's a lot of different options in creating dashes. Okay, this is related to the fuel pressure, and there's something interesting I found in here. Now, I don't know, didn't remember, whatever, maybe it's changed, I don't know. But I am setting my initial fuel pressure on my regulator. And I go in here and I go to fuel pressure, pump and pressure control. So my relay is turned on and off wherever the ECU wants it on and off. So when I turn the key on, it charges the system, yada, yada, yada. Then I'm using a vacuum referenced regulator. We'll look at that. And my static pressure, I want to have at 43.5 PSI, which if you convert that into kPa, it is 299.92 something, whatever. So 300 kPa. Now, I am going to be wanting to use my pressure sensor input, and I use that fuel pressure sensor and put it in generic settings. But I noticed something in here. When I look at this, it is in kPa. So going over to this question mark here, it says, note, you must use kPa in generic sensors. You can still log in the display in PSI or bar. But anyway, so what I need to do is I need to go close this up, and I'm going to go back into the advanced engine and look at my generic sensor inputs. Now, if I look at this scale I have in PSI. So it's a 0 at 0.5 volts, 100 at 4.5. So I am going to go in here, and if I take 100 PSI and I convert it to kPa, it is 689.5 roughly. And so now I have converted this into, I've converted it into kPa. And that's what the gauge is going to read. Make sure when you do changes that you burn them. Now I'm going back over to the fuel settings, back to the pump and pressure, and I want to turn this on and sensor 2. And if you look at this drop-down menu, we have gauge, absolute, and differential. So gauge is like this is measured in kPa, gauge is 0 to whatever our pressure is, taking into account that we are zeroing out our atmosphere, but we're actually in a roughly 14.7 pound atmosphere. Taking that to the next one would be absolute, and absolute would be that we're in a perfect vacuum. Well, we don't live in a perfect vacuum, but if we are in a perfect vacuum, it would go to 0, which that's not how we have set our gauges up. So it is gauge, and differential is if we have two sensors and it's telling between the two. So in this, you want to use gauge, that meaning that 0 actually absolute means 14.7. So we are measuring above what our atmosphere is when we're using gauge. And the temperature sensor input, we aren't using that temperature sensor. So I'm going to burn this and we'll take a look at the car. So this is the fuel pressure regulator, and I have it vacuum referenced. So this goes into the intake manifold, and then this is how we adjust it. And I have this manual gauge on here. I'm going to get this thing set up initially to our 43.5 PSI here, as well as we'll double check that that's what our fuel pressure sensor is reading. And what we can do, I'll show you how to trigger this so we can set it up. If I want to actually turn this fuel pump on, what I can do is, I'm not even sure where it is. I think it's test mode IO1. Yeah, so I can take and enable the test mode here. And now I can actually turn the fuel pump on. And if I go over here, I can set my pressure, but I got a big leak, so we got to turn it off. I have a lot of fittings on this thing, and that's a good way to test for leaks without the vehicle running. So anyway, you want to test your fuel pump. So I'm going to turn it back on. And I have my pressure set there. And my leak, I had one fitting loose, but it is good. Everything else appears to be not leaking, which is very happy. All right, on my tuner screen here, you can see I set up a fuel pressure gauge, and this is in kPa. And if I take and turn the fuel pump on, so we're, according to the gauge under the hood, this should be at 300 with that little analog gauge. But when I turn the fuel pump on, the sensor is showing me that I'm a little bit under. So I am going to correct it to this pressure here, because this is what we want to be on. So I'm just going to get that done. Hopefully that is helping you out on how to set that part of it up. So this video is getting pretty long, but we've set up all the engine sensors and dealt with everything that we can, other than things like the IAC. And actually what I'll do is I'll do a quick video on the IAC. And then after that one, I'll probably do a video on getting this thing started through the test modes and everything that we set up. And we'll see if it'll fire up. And then later on, we'll deal with this water methanol stuff. It might be way down the road because I got to get this to the body shop. We'll see, time permitting. But I really appreciate you watching this video. Hopefully you got some good information about it. It is a lot of information on how to set this MegaSquirt up. And I just have to say, I really love working with the MegaSquirt stuff. It's pretty easy to use, and they have a great tech department. So if you ever run into something, they're really helpful with that. But if you don't mind, please like, share, and subscribe.